existing and non-conforming, and with respect to the special permit, the applicants are seeking a finding that the existing home won't substantially increase any detrimental or injurious effect to the building or the use in the neighborhood. So that's my rough version of what the case is all about. My name is John Leonard. I'm Chairman of the Board of Appeals. With me tonight, to my immediate left, is Board Member Virginia Donahue King, and to my immediate right is Board Member Francis O'Brien. The rules are such that we'll hear from the applicant or the applicant's counsel. We'll hear from people who have questions to ask with respect to the application, and we'll be interested in hearing from any people who wish to speak in support of the application or speak in opposition to the various applications. We'll have as evidence for the hearing the application, which is dated August 15th, 2019. We have a denial letter by Mr. Prondak, which is dated August 12, 2019, 3 days before the applicant applied, but that seems to be standard practice in the town.
Very good.
In the town of Milton. We have a locus map that Mrs. McKettrick has furnished us with, showing the property. We have a series of external plans showing the various portions of the structure as proposed in the addition. We have a series of interior plans showing the various rooms that are in the building and how they're going to hopefully be altered, amended, and improved. I have more plans here. Maybe they're duplicated here, but this is not
It's a bit confusing,
This
yes.
isn't a mansion, I think.
No, and you don't, so,
So, okay, we've got a lot of plans here. I'm not going to identify each of them. We'll be here till 9 o'clock. We have a quitclaim deed that Mr. Paul O'Sullivan and Lynn Harnish O'Sullivan granted to the Harnishes. The deed is dated December 16th, 2016, and it's recorded in the Norfolk County Registry of Deeds on December 19, 2016. So without further ado, Mrs. McKettrick.
Chairman, do we have a plot plan?
I think we don't, but we do have this. We have that. I don't think we have a formal plot plan. Do we have a plot plan, Mary?
I'm not sure, but when I explain what's actually going on, you may feel that it isn't necessarily required.
Okay.
So,
welcome to the Board of Appeals.
thank you. I'm Mary McKettrick, and I represent Kyle and Sanaz Harnish. And they are the applicants here. And the history, as Mr. Leonard described it, is fairly accurate. What happened was the Harnishes purchased the property from their family in 2016, but this is the house that the family has lived in for many years. And after purchasing the property, they developed plans to add an addition. As you face the house in the front, sort of a farmhouse style, turn of the 19th century, colonial, I guess you'd call it. They're building a garage underneath and an addition above on the left side of the property as you face it from the street. And the building commissioner has approved the building plans, and the addition is under construction. So there is no variance or special permit required for the addition, and I'm sorry that I wasn't too clear about that, but it's so confusing to explain that.
So it's a matter of right.
So the addition is a matter of right.
Okay.
So the issue that arose is that when the building inspector went into the house, he said, well, in the back here, you have this area that was added in, a long time ago, more than 20 years ago, and there was a building permit application filed and approved, and then subsequent to that, there was an application approved for kitchen improvements, and perhaps that's when a kitchenette or kitchen was added to that back addition. In any case, it's there now, and at the time the addition was built, there was no temporary apartment bylaw, but we also didn't allow two-family houses to be built by right in residential zones. However, over the years, the interpretation of what constitutes a two-family home has sometimes changed depending on who the building commissioner is. In any case, what I can tell you now is it's very strict, and if there's anything that even resembles a kitchen, a microwave, and a hot plate even, and a small refrigerator, building commissioner deems that to be a kitchen in a separate apartment, and he would require some kind of a variance or temporary special permit if it were going to be a temporary apartment. So what the applicants agreed to do was to come to the Board of Appeals and ask for approval for their rear apartment, which happens to conform to the dimensional requirements of our temporary apartment bylaw, as a temporary apartment, so that it will now be a legal temporary apartment. And the current resident, the person who's in that bedroom and rear area, is Kyle Harnish's mother, Lynn Harnish O'Sullivan. And before that, Kyle Harnish's grandmother lived in that rear area. It has never been locked and separated, which was one reason the family didn't feel that it really was a separate apartment. But that's not at issue here. Everybody has agreed that technically under the zoning bylaw it is. And so if they weren't building the addition, I would just be coming into you and saying, you know, as if they hadn't done it yet, we would like approval for this as a temporary apartment. Because they're building the addition at the same time, and because our bylaw says you can't create a temporary apartment, you have to create it in an existing building and the addition isn't finished, I think that I have to ask you for a variance of a special permit. As I have in other cases, in all those other cases where applicants came in, they were building an addition, they were putting the temporary apartment in the addition. That's not the case here. But the way the bylaw is written, you can't add any addition onto the house after you have a temporary apartment. And so I think you need a variance and a special permit. Maybe the board will disagree with that, but I felt it was important to apply for both in case it was necessary to have them. It has been a use in place for 30 years or more. There has been no problem. There's enough space to park. It's invisible in terms of being a separate apartment because it's in the rear of the residence. And I don't think it even, I guess there may be a rear entrance. Let's see how this is set up now. There will be a rear entrance because I'm not sure what it was like before, but with the garage completed, there's going to be a covered porch at the rear, and so you could go around to the rear and then enter the temporary apartment that way or enter the main house that way through the mudroom. So it's designed, as it happens, similarly, I guess, to some of the applications that we have seen for additions that we're going to have temporary apartments in them. So that's why you have two plans. You have an A3 and an A31. A31 shows you the temporary apartment with a sitting room, kitchenette, dining area, 2 bedrooms, and study in the rear. The A3 plan shows sitting room, library, sunroom, bedroom, and study in the rear. That's how the temporary apartment would be converted back to be a regular part of the house. And you can see that there's a doorway existing now and in the future. It's moved a little bit, depending on what use it is, going into the dining area and the family room in the main house. The area for the apartment is 756 square feet, so it does conform to our maximum area of 800 square feet. I mean, it's no more than that. And the owner did intend to be here, so if you do have questions that I can't answer, I'd ask you to continue this till after 8 o'clock, and then we would allow him to answer. But I'm happy to answer questions.
I've never heard many lawyers say that.
Well,
They seem to be able to answer almost any question that anyone can imagine. Let me see, if you finished your
I'm finished.
presentation.
Thank you.
Let me see if my colleagues have any questions. Mrs. King. And I should say, Marion, when I read this file into the record by reference, you did file a letter August 15, 2019, explaining the circumstances and the substance of your testimony, which is roughly consistent with the advertisement. But, so
We
Thank
did.
you for that.
I did review the ad afterwards, and what I thought was that it allowed for more than what I was asking for, which isn't harmful. As long as it allowed for what I wanted to apply for, I didn't think there was any reason to have to re-advertise. But again,
Great. Mrs. King, please.
I have to say, I haven't read this file because I didn't receive it. So I'm playing catch-up here. So
all right.
let me sit and listen to what your questions are. That might prompt
Okay,
me
that's
with
fine.
some as well.
Mr. O'Brien is never at a loss for questions. Frank?
Mary, this is pretty convoluted. When I read this, this feels to me like a belts and suspenders application. I read this, and I'm not one to disagree with our building commissioner. I think he does a great job in reading the building code and the zoning code, and he did issue a denial letter. With the removal of the kitchenette, to me, that is essentially the removal of the temporary in-law apartment. So to me, that would have cured things. But I don't really think you need what you're asking for. On the other hand, it does no harm to do it, and if it buttons up the title and whatnot, it just kind of seemed to me kind of unnecessary. But you know, making a title bulletproof and whatnot, I can understand why you would want to go in that direction, and why I mean, I don't think that, I'm not questioning your judgment or anything else on this or your interpretation. I think your interpretation is perfectly reasonable. I just came out in a different place, but I could be wrong and you could be right, and frankly, if we're going to go in this particular direction, this is the way to cure anything on down the road that might be problematic.
Do you want to respond?
well, I guess what I want to make sure everyone understands is that Lynn Harnish O'Sullivan currently lives in the house with
Yeah.
her family, and her bedroom's in the back, and she has this kitchenette. She has this little separate living area and kitchenette. They keep it open and unlocked because that's the way they've always lived in the house. She can, so, you know, under the current interpretation by our building commissioner, that does constitute a temporary apartment, and it is not permitted as a temporary apartment. So there's a problem if she wants to continue to have the kitchenette. That's what it boils down to, you're
Right.
right.
I agree with
So
that.
we could take the kitchenette out, then we could come back later and have a regular conventional special permit application. But she's living there. So technically, they're in violation right now, unless they want to go to the trouble of taking the kitchenette out and putting it back in. So what I'm saying to you is, it's uneconomic, it's inefficient, and it would be a great inconvenience to an older person who's living with her family to have to go through this type of disruption. If there were a concern with the variance, if you hear of opposition or something like that, I certainly would consider withdrawing the application in its present form and saying, well, we'll come back, which is what we could do otherwise. But I did think that this most closely resembled that situation that we've seen a number of times recently that the bylaw does not allow for, when you're building an addition and you also want to create a temporary apartment. And usually the reason you say, well, we'll let you do it is because why do you want to, you know, not put pipes in for the temporary kitchen, and then after the addition's built, rip the wall out and put the pipes in? That's the justification.
I've sat on at least three of those cases. So, I mean, I get the approach. I don't have a problem with it. I actually am not opposed to the relief being sought or anything. Okay.
I'm really asking you to treat it as if the apartment's about to be constructed, rather having been, which is what happens when somebody does something
Yeah.
they're supposed to do in the past, and then the building commissioner comes in, and this is use. We're talking about use here.
Right.
So it's not legal, even though it's existed for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see a problem in the relief you're seeking. Again, I just, it may not be necessary, but on the other hand, I can understand the reason for seeking it, so.
You know, if I had talked to them before any of this started, there might have been an easier approach, but I think the addition is underway and so on and so forth. So I'm just asking you to consider what the best way is, and I think this may be the best way.
Thank you very much. Let me see if there's anybody present who wants to be heard regarding this application, either with questions of Mrs. McKettrick or, well, I guess the question of Mrs. McKettrick. There's no such person here. Does anyone want to speak in opposition to this particular application? There's no such person here. One question, Mrs. King, do you want to weigh in, or are you content with the state of
I'm
the evidence?
content. I think the last evening that I was here on Board of Appeals matters, we had one that was similar. There was an addition that was going to be being put up that was going to be a temporary in-law apartment, or whatever they call them, temporary apartment within the house. And again, we were citing, the fact that it's just not economic to do it following exactly the way the bylaw is written. And it just seems silly not to grant this right now, especially since it's there. The neighbors have been living with it for many years, and we have not heard anyone complaining about it. I'm comfortable.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. McKettrick, do you have anything further you want to add?
No, I don't.
Okay, good. We'll end the evidence portion of the hearing and discuss it in open session, and hopefully vote on it here and now, and perhaps before your clients even show up. Mr. O'Brien, do you want to be heard first?
I think the application is very well presented, and I think it cures an issue, and I would be in favor of granting the variance, granting the relief sought, because there's a variance, a special.
It's both a
It's a
special
variance and a
permit
special permit, yeah.
Mrs. King.
I'll be succinct. I agree.
Okay, well, I agree. I thought the application was well presented. It's really a curious fact pattern. I think we gain nothing by inconveniencing, or some would say terrorizing, people who've been living in their apartment for a long period of time. And everyone's busy, and Mrs. McKettrick is popular and expensive, and we want to keep this application in check. And I see no detriment, as Mr. O'Brien has said, wading in the nuances of our bylaw, which perhaps needs to be revised in multiple sections, really gets us nowhere, and having purity of thought here is perhaps not in the best interests of anyone. So that's my position. I intend to vote to grant the special permit and the variance. So all those in favor of granting the relief requested in the application regarding 202 Churchill Lane, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Congratulations.
Thank you. I will offer, as I have in the past, in this case, because it is a little bit confusing framing the relief, if you want me to draft something and give it to your clerk to give to whoever's writing the decision, I'd be happy to do that. If you think it would be helpful, just let me know.
I think it'd be a wonderful idea. I was going to ask Mr. O'Brien to write this decision,
I'll
but
write it, and if
he's been busy of late and been sitting a lot, so a draft decision would be...
Geez, I feel like I'm in the Superior Court.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks, Marion. Maybe there's a future there.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
You probably can't afford to do that. That's the
I'm
difficulty.
going to stay here while I wait for my client.
Well, that's great. You can introduce them to us, so they'll feel welcome. Thanks, Marion. Why don't you
Yeah,
take
I'll
this,
grab it.
and we'll see Marion's usually pretty quick in turning her draft decisions around.
Hopefully she'll speed me along.
Well, we don't want to continue to bury you with decision stories.
Hello.
You looking for the Board of Appeals?
Yes.
You found us.
I'm at the 8 o'clock.
You're the 8 o'clock,
8
okay.
o'clock, yes.
Well, we have one more hearing before you, but why don't you relax and get comfortable and... Are you looking for Mrs. McKettrick?
Yeah. Oh, she just walked that way. We just got approved.
Yes, well, she didn't walk out, she just left us, and we can break the good news to you, but maybe she'll do that first.
Oh, hello. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you, good to see you.
I had the strangest things going on.
Let's call to order our second hearing of the evening. This is the application of Mary Beth, excuse me, Mayo, dated August 14, 2019, seeking a special permit from the terms of Section 3A9 of the General Bylaws of the Town of Milton, so as to allow the use of a temporary in-law apartment for Mary Swan, the mother of the applicant, within the dwelling at 30 Sheldon Street in Milton. The ad says, in accordance with the special permit that was originally granted by the board on February 26, 1997, Section 3A9 of the bylaw limits temporary apartments in this instance for a period of 4 years, at least as of 1997. And so the applicants are seeking basically the application is expired, so they're seeking a new permit for the in-law apartment. My name is John Leonard. I'm chairman of the Board of Appeals. With me this evening to my immediate right is board member Francis O'Brien. To my immediate left is board member Virginia Donahue King. The rules of the board are just like the first application. We'll hear from the applicant or their counsel. We'll hear from people who want to speak in support of the application, have questions, or people who wish to speak in opposition. We tape recording the proceedings this evening, as always, so to speak up nice and loud and clear. Tell us your name and address before you speak. We'll have as evidence for the hearing the 8/14/2019 application. We have a denial letter by Mr. Prondak is dated July 24th, 2019. Yes, thank you. Thank you, thank you. We have the decision of the Board of Appeals that was entered by the late Rod Conley, one of the great chairmen of the Board of Appeals, in my view, Attorney Jim Doherty, and former Board of Appeals member Brian Hurley. So we have that, and we have the application that was filed, and the certification by former clerk Jim Mullen. This is a trip through history for the Board of Appeals. We have a letter from the Swans, basically asking for the special permit. We have some assents to this, but they're all dated in 1996. So we have them as part of the record. I assume that means there wasn't any opposition to this one. We have some plans of the subject property, and we have the application for special permit, which is on the fancy forms that we don't use anymore, pre-printed forms, and look very official and have some fancy instructions on the back. So we'll have all of these documents as evidence at this particular hearing. So are the applicants here? Yes. Oh, sure, come on up then. You're Mary Beth Mayo.
Yes.
Welcome to the Board of Appeals.
Thank you.
We're delighted to hear from you.
Well, thank you. So my name is Mary Beth Mayo, and everything you said is true to the best. Nothing has changed other than I had a leaky roof, and the board of whoever comes out to look at electrical came in and said, wait a second, what is this kitchen doing here? And I said, oh, it's been here for 20 years. And to my knowledge, I learned that every 4 years, I'm supposed to come here and fill out an application. So nothing has changed. All those paperworks are in place, are still exactly the same.
Okay.
My mother is still living with me. She's still sickly. There are no separate entrances. It's just simply a extra kitchen in the existing house that's been there for 20 years.
Okay, and the various plans are still true and accurate?
Absolutely, nothing has changed.
Nothing has changed in 20 years. It's wonderful, I think. Okay, Mr. O'Brien, do you have any questions about this application?
No, I mean, you're the owner, nothing has
Yes,
changed.
history is
Some
being
paint.
made tonight.
Paint
ladies and
colors,
gentlemen,
maybe,
note
that's
this.
about it, yeah.
I'm sorry?
I said paint colors, maybe, that's about it, yeah.
Okay.
Nothing.
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Mrs. King?
No, I have none.
Well, I thought this application was presented in an outstanding manner by Ms. Mayo. Let me see, you must have showed up at the board to watch some of these.
Yes, that was my brother, I can't
okay.
take full.
Your brother showed up.
Yeah.
Okay. He didn't watch us
I was
on TV,
there.
did he?
Probably
He
has.
did. Oh, well, then we're frightened
course, so
him away.
yeah.
He'd never come back. Okay, let's see if there's anybody in the audience who wants to be heard in support of the application, and there's no such person. Anyone present who wants to ask questions of the applicant? None? Is there anybody present who wants to speak in opposition to this application for special permit? And there is no such person present, so do you have anything else you'd like to add?
I do not.
Okay, most people would, Mrs. McGettrick would tell you, if you're ahead, it's best to quit.
Yes.
Not continue on. So, okay, let's see what the board members feel with respect to this application. Mrs. King, do you want to be heard?
I don't think there's anything I need to say. It sounds like something that we need to cure by having the apartment given a permit again. So I'm all for it.
Mr. Fitzgerald, Mr. O'Brien, I have Fitzgerald's on my mind tonight. Go ahead.
Nothing has changed in 20 years, so I'm in favor of granting the relief.
Yeah, I think it's great that everything's the same, and Mother's still living there, and I'm sure she's thrilled to live there, and I hope she's not overly concerned that the in-law apartment was not going to get continued, and she may have to
I didn't even give her
a
the,
hotel or something.
yeah.
That's probably just as
I was just the nervous one this time.
So all those in favor of granting this particular application for a special permit with the same terms and conditions as granted in the 1996 special permit, please say aye.
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 Aye. So congratulations.
Thank you,
I
thank
think
you.
two things. You made a nice presentation. Thank you for filling out all the forms accurately. And I think you've set a record. I think this has been the
Yes,
shortest
it
hearing in the history of the appeals. and we probably dragged it out longer than we should.
So the other thing is hopefully you're back here
In 4 years. That's a lesson learned. I had no idea, or I definitely would have. It was much easier with the help of this young lady over here telling me my rules. I had no idea, other than the leaky roof. That's really what
Everyone
brought
raves about Mrs. Sutton, so.
Yes, of course.
And just the important thing is just file early. We can,
Right.
we can hear it afterwards, but just get your application in first.
Right, yes.
So congratulations, and
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Okay, you too.
Drive
Thank
safe.
you.
Thank you.
Ginny, do you want to do this? Oh, you-
When are they going to be effective as of?
What do you mean?
Is it going to be effective? As of the filing date?
The filing with the clerk,
Yeah.
the clerk of the town.
Okay, that's fine.
But it's subject to an appeal.
Right, no, Jeff did it because of the month.
Right, he kind of done
Keep that.
And here's this is the new one, that's the 1996. Oh, okay. Okay, well, let's start our third hearing of the evening, and we can do that because it's after 8 o'clock. This is the application of Paul and Andrea Doherty, dated August 14th, 2019, seeking a special permit under Section 3A9 of the bylaws, so as to use a temporary in-law apartment for Linda Doherty, who's the sister-in-law of the applicant, within the premises at 8 Thistle Avenue in Milton. The ad reads, in accordance with the special permit originally granted by the board on January 13th, 1994. And the bylaw limits temporary in-law apartments for a period of 4 continuous years. So this one says a special permit which can be extended by the board. I think we're granting a new special permit. We're not extending or renewing things that go back that far, but we can take the evidence. And so let me do the rest of the preambles. My name is John Leonard. I'm chairman of the Board of Appeals. Virginia Donahue King is to my immediate left. Attorney Frank O'Brien is to my immediate right. The substance of the application, I've read the ad. We have the application dated 8/14/2019. We'll have that as evidence. We have a denial letter of July 24th, 2019 by Mr. Prondak. And we have the notice attached to this application of the January 13, 1994 decision of the board being granted on January 13th, 1994 with conditions. And we also have the 1994 file with the decision of the Board of Appeals. And we have Mr. Conley as chairman, Mr. Doherty, who was involved in the last application, and the late Roger Gregg. This brings back history. Roger Gregg was one of the fine members of the Board of Appeals for years and years, and he was on the board when I was first appointed to this board over 20 years ago. So it's good to see Roger's name. He's a wonderful person, was a wonderful person, and a great board member. And we have that entire application with plans and filings with the clerk and notices, and we'll incorporate all of these materials in our present hearing. So who's going to be present? Who's going to make the presentation here?
Well, I'll almost repeat verbatim what the last woman said. There's been no change in property in the past 20-some-odd years,
Isn't that amazing?
except for the person living there.
Yes, yes. And so, do you have anything else you'd like to add? We've incorporated all of this stuff in by reference.
I think we're good.
Okay, well, let's do
Again,
that.
we apologize for the 4 years,
Well, you know,
longer than 4 years.
well, people sometimes have short memories and get busy with a lot of other things, and it's not an issue at all, but we want to correct the issue and get you back on board. So, Mr. O'Brien, do you have any questions?
So nothing at all has changed?
Nope.
The layout's the same, no visible changes from the
No.
outside?
No.
The only change is the tenant and the tenant is?
It's my sister,
His sister-in-law.
her sister-in-law.
My
yeah.
sister-in-law, his sister, my sister-in-law.
Okay.
It was her uncle originally,
Okay.
And he passed.
passed away.
And so was there a period of time when the in-law apartment was just not being used?
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, at least a year or so.
Oh, it's fairly recent.
Oh, no.
No, 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 no.
Sister-in-law, no.
Your sister-in-law moved in,
Yeah.
okay, so you didn't get put in the in-law apartment in the doghouse or something like that? No.
No, well, we cleaned it up a little bit. And
Okay.
it sat while she was getting things ready on her end, and then she moved in.
Okay, great. Any more questions, Mr. O'Brien?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Mrs. King? No questions. I don't have any more questions. Let's see if there's anybody here who has questions or wants to be heard. Is anybody here who has questions of the applicants or otherwise wishes to speak in support of the application? There's no such person present? No? Oh, Ginny has a
Well, I'm
question.
not writing this, so it doesn't matter. I was just wondering what her name is. I have to put that in.
Yes, her name is in the, Linda Doherty.
It's on the application.
Never mind.
Okay, and is there anybody present who wishes to speak in support, strike it in opposition to this application? And there is no such person present? Do you have anything else you'd like to add?
No?
Okay, evidence closed. We'll discuss this in open session. Mr. O'Brien?
Very straightforward.
I agree.
I have to say something here. I guess I have to agree. Everyone will wonder why we're here tonight. I thought that this was a wonderfully presented application. All of the materials, and it's very technical materials that have to be filed, have been filed, and I'm sure you reviewed this file to make sure everything is right up to date. So I hope Linda Doherty has a wonderful time in residence in your in-law apartment. So I intend to vote for this application. All those in favor of granting the application with the usual and customary statutory conditions, please say aye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
So So, thank you very much. We appreciate you coming, and I didn't say at the first hearing, because Marion knows more law than we do, and I didn't say it at the second hearing, but we're going to prepare this and have it typed up. We've got to get it signed, and then we have to get it filed with the town clerk, okay?
Okay.
Very technically, even though nobody's opposed to the application, somebody could appeal within the 20 days, but it's, the chances of that happening are de minimis, so don't lose any sleep over that. But thanks for coming.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
We'll see you in 3 years and
3.5 years when we file again.
that probably makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
All right, thanks again.
Thank you.
Any further business before the board? Do you have a motion to adjourn? We never do this. Oh,
I second.
okay, we're adjourned. You don't have any presentation?